What happened?
Panic! Panic!
You're there. Hello and welcome to another episode of Literary Gladiators, the show where we discuss and debate literature in all of its forms. If it's written work, it's game. Let's meet the panel.
My name's Nick.
I'm Tori.
And I'm Josh. Nick, welcome back. I know that Dan had a lot of nice things to say about you in the and from what I've seen, you did a great job in the comic book discussions that you took part in while I was on my siesta. And we also want to shout out Jessie, who was unfortunately not able to take part in this discussion. She was slated to do so, but she got sick while she was in Atlantic City. So today we're going to be going over a long-awaited work, a mammoth of a book, and a complicated one at that. It's like the Rubik's Cube of chunkers.
That is a very good description for this Rubik's Cube.
And it is House of Leaves by Mark Z. Danielewski.
I was very excited when you said that we were going to be reading this and going over it, so it's probably one of my favorite books. And I think it's pretty evident why it's one of my favorite books. I'm curious to hear what you guys have to say about it.
Yes, I have a lot to say about it.
So,
you have the discussion starter, Tori?
So I don't even know where to begin on this behemoth.
Yeah, where do you begin? Where do you end?
The first page.
I don't know about this.
Yeah, true.
You can begin anywhere in this book, and in and of itself, it is quite the journey, both on a literary and a physical platform. So I think probably one of my favorite, one of the questions that I want to start with is, where in reading this book did you realize this is not an ordinary story? Or that something in it is different? Or did you realize, or did you have that dawning realization that
when they hired Johnny Truant to be the editor?
Okay.
But I think that from the start, I knew that this was not an ordinary book because when I was operating the literature club back at OCC, that was about 6 years ago, our advisor, Jay Henneke, who was a guest contributor, made mention to the fact that this was a very different book that took completely different approaches.
It challenges the term book. You ask me anything about like a traditional publication.
What is the term for when you use words artistically?
There is a term, and I looked it up. Yeah, it's something to that effect. I looked it up, and
for instance, high school would be school written at the top of the page. With this, when he's going deeper into
I was just about to say, I can literally flip open the book, and you can follow. One of the interesting things, as a little spoiler alert,
it's a discussion. It's subject to spoilers.
Yeah, right. But so hopefully, if you're watching this, you have read this book. If you haven't, you don't mind us spoiling a little bit of it. I mean, even talking about it is enough to say, like, you can go so much deeper into it. But so long story short, the way that the story is written, it starts out normal enough. I use the word normal loosely here, but as you go farther and farther into the story and into the complex, convoluted story, the book kind of almost starts to take on the physical of what is happening to the characters. I have my one note here that I wrote to myself, the revelation. The book is the house. So let's see. Let's see if I can summarize this. It is a book written by a man who found the transcript of a blind man who wrote a critical dissertation, Zampano, about a movie, about a documentary, about a house that doesn't exist. The movie doesn't exist. All of it is very heresy. There are, throughout the entire book, footnotes that list random people or list people who are real who never actually said these things, don't know of this existing. So the whole entire thing is this lovely dance between, real and not real, and where do you blur the line of fiction and reality. And if you ask me, it's probably one of the original forms of the found footage horror genre, because this came out in 2000. The book was published in 2000. I went down this little rabbit hole with my sister last night. So the book was published in 2000. The Blair Witch Project came out in 1999. This book was online in a different transcript form on a website specifically housed for this for years prior to this.
Housed.
No pun intended. So if you ask me, this is the origin of the found. If you think about all of the movies that are out nowadays with the shaky hand cams and
I got that
and
vibe.
Slender
that
Man
shaky,
and stuff like
that
that.
shaky hand cam
That's
vibe.
basically what this is. This is the birth of that. If you ask me, and I'm not trying to be hoity-toity, but the whole entire book lends itself part and parcel in that kind of strange, out of the ordinary. And the guy who made this was really kooky too. He hand typed everything, and when asked, there were select manuscripts that he hand typed and hand made and personally delivered to the editors because he did not trust anybody else with this. So the Mark Danielewski is in of himself a character and kind of this other layer. And so if you look this book up, you will find websites, forums, just on and on and on, listlessly, people devoted to this book. And
you have to be.
I literally went down a rabbit hole. My sticky notes are at home because I was I look like a crazy person. I feel like the character here because I was trying to follow. There's one chapter where they talk about Morse code, and I was trying to follow the dots. I actually looked up Morse code and was following along, and it was
I hated that. I got to that part. I'm just I
loved it.
I'm what?
There's so much to use a fancy term here to unpack in this book that it's kind of almost hard to just relegate yourself to a small discussion like this. So I strongly urge you, the viewer, if you have not read House of Leaves, please go find a copy of House of Leaves and read it. And what's really funny is this is my older sister's copy, and when she handed it to me, we found all these things
Is this what we're talking about? The beginning of chapter 2?
Oh no, that's Braille. That's
Braille.
whole other,
Yeah.
there's
Braille
and there's, but if you look, let me see if I can find it.
What would have been cooler is if they actually, had it, not just the dots, actual Braille. Where
okay.
You can touch it and
So,
stuff.
in this one chapter, there's literally in the way, because it's describing how SOS works, and it describes the different, I had to look up how the Morse code works, and the paragraphs break down, and within the paragraphs, and within the footnotes, and within the stories of the footnotes, because the guy who originally found this transcript, he kind of interposes throughout the entire thing, and you will literally, kind of like how the house in this separate room that created itself overnight, you wend and you turn and you fold in on itself, you will get to this point where, and I even marked it, where kind of in the movie it starts showing how the house has unfolded. The movie, thank you. Yeah, the air quote, the movie, and that Zampano was talking about, you literally get to this part in the book where it starts to become the house. So you have this 4-foot shaft. This is a footnote, and you follow the footnote all the way.
I actually believe it's on one side it's backwards.
And you see this is what it looks like on the back of it. So you follow it, and then you get to this one part in the book where let me see. I just love this book so much. So, like, you get to a page, and then it shows you, and then there's a footnote here that you follow through, and then it gets to this footnote, which you have to follow. Now the book's upside down, and you're following it back to where you began. You go in a gigantic circle, just reading this thing, and, like, seriously.
All the
please,
ink that he wasted.
go find this book.
The paper he wasted.
Did he waste it, though? Here's
No. And when I was reading it, I was showing people, like, the pages, like, that have one word on it.
Yeah.
And they were just like, dude, they're wasting paper.
I think the best part of when he was going, it was his 5th exploration. It was the very last one where it almost makes, I think someone with claustrophobia is going to get up and run away from the book.
This book, I literally
I have claustrophobia, and I was just, like, holding on to it even
so
tighter.
did Karen.
The very first time that I read this, it's probably one of the most visceral feelings I've ever had reading a book. It gets to a part where it's explaining this sensation of dread that overcomes the one character, let's call him the main character. And it talks about that existential dread, and it tells you, like, don't look anywhere else, just focus on the page. Now imagine this terrible, horrible thing creeping up on you. And for some reason that happened to me. I'm sitting in my room, all the lights are on, I'm sitting on my floor in my room, and all of a sudden the walls closed in. I had that weird claustrophobia. Like, I had to chuck the book, and I couldn't read the book for 3 whole days. It was the very first time I've ever read, like, a psychological horror book like this. So
I love, that's my favorite genre, psychological
It was my
horror.
I
introduction
enjoy
to this,
psychological horror as well. I think
That honestly, this book is a great introduction. Great introduction.
I think Stephen King he said it best when he said in Dance Macabre, horror should terrify, and if it can't do that, it should horrify, and then it should go for the gross out if nothing else works.
Like, when I first heard about this book, it was on, like, I was reading a list of, I think, the top 10 weirdest books or oddest books.
This is an odd
and
book.
When I heard about this, I was like, I need to read this. And then when I finally found the opportunity to read it, I was just like, this, like, the storyline was cool because it had 3 stories in one, basically. It had the story of how he got the information, it got the story about the movie, and then how this information impacted the guy's life as well. And he was able to mend it all together to work. Footnotes I wasn't too fond of, but whatever. But
I couldn't stand Johnny Truant. To me, Johnny Truant was... If you took Charlie Galizia, you took his raspberry Snapple and spiked it with whiskey and Viagra, you get Johnny Truant.
Oh my, that's a fun one.
The only part I didn't like was the one about the part about the Pomeranian. The dog.
Why can't I remember that?
The dog, he got picked up, went after the dog, and the lady wound up taking the dog and throwing it out the car window.
Oh, yeah.
That was the only part I did not like. Everything else, like the storyline, I wasn't too fond of, but how it was written.
I wasn't interested in his encounters with prostitutes. The story about his mother was a little bit interesting, but she was.
I kind of want to meet this Thumper lady, though.
So this brings me to my other question that I wanted to ask you guys. Does the story itself have any, like, is the story important, or is it the telling of the story? Is it the relaying of the story that's more important?
I think that the way that the story's laid out is revolutionary.
Yes.
I think that I liked the expedition of Navidson going into the house.
Yeah, I found more connection with the story of the movie, the Navidson record. Like, I found more connection to that. All the other stuff, like, if that wasn't in there, I would have still liked the story.
Yeah.
But
I would have liked it better, but I think that's the traditionalist side
the
of
purist
my mind.
of reading a book. And I think
But-
you would lose some of the book, though, if you didn't have his random interjections.
Yeah,
Of
like
having that emotional breakdown
Make-
of this man who kind of stumbled on this on accident.
I honestly thought
Train
my
got
mind
too
was
carried
breaking
away.
down at some point because it would just go on to this tangent. I'm just like, am I reading the same book?
Yeah, the footnote is 3 pages long.
Yeah,
I've
like,
lost the story,
I'll
but
put it to
I'm
you
just
this
like,
way.
I think you lost
If
one.
I was looking
Yeah,
for
I know.
somebody
It's gone.
to,
It's okay.
if I was looking for
The house
somebody,
doesn't let anything live for too long.
if I was looking for somebody to edit my memoir, it definitely wouldn't be Johnny Truman.
Well, here's the thing, though. He wasn't supposed to be the editor. He found this man's manuscript. This guy died. Supposedly, Zappano was found dead in his apartment, and his friend was like, yo, you gotta come check this out. So he stumbled on this box of written words that was on, if I remember, described everything from, like, random manuscript paper to the back of postage stamps, and on paper, and on napkins.
Yeah.
And he was blind, so he had this dictated, like, he was dictating this to random people. He had, like, a dozen different people.
That makes the Braille all the more sense. But I think what would have been more effective is if he was able to make it so that you could actually feel the letters.
Yeah, but I don't think when this was published that was, like, an ability that is I mean, it's fairly well found nowadays, but I'm trying to, like, figure out what to say or go from here, but, like, the whole entire story is just this fabulous compendium of, like, random found objects, basically. And that's what it's supposed to feel like, is that you got kind of this dumped in your lap, and you have to decipher it
without any, like, oh, what is this about? Like, you couldn't really ask questions.
I think if there's one thing you can't complain about, it's the fact that I think they do their best to answer every question you may have. Even why Johnny Truant is insane, why he's
slowly losing his
a
brain.
weird bird to begin with.
Yeah.
On page 116.
I think like begets like, so...
Yeah, on page 116.
I started losing my mind halfway. I was just like...
I know, I've read this once before, and then I got to the part where it starts folding in on itself, and I lost...
I didn't even get to that part, and I was like...
I was trying to follow the footnotes, and I'm literally like, where am I? Like, I can't find... I'm like, 186, 186,
The weird thing is,
Where's
once it started getting all crazy, that's when I was able to be like, okay, now I understand.
Moment, yeah.
I'm like, now I got it.
So, while you look for what you're looking for, I have my third and final question. On page 97, what does the checkmark mean? It is the biggest point of contention in the House of Leaves fandom. What do you think the checkmark means? It's the only checkmark in the entire book. It has no meaning throughout the entire. That's why I started trying to follow the Morse code here. Was at the beginning
There's
of the story.
actually other shapes in this book that.
I mean, hell, it starts with this circle and the pause button, and then it ends with a pause button. So this book is fantastic, and I love it so much. Disregard the sand that's in there. I don't know why there's beach sand in that. In the creases, my sister has like beach sand in it.
I can't answer
Probably
that
where your
question.
sister
I don't
read the
know.
book.
Probably, yeah. This is a good beach read. This is the kind of book you want to.
Yeah,
read
there's nothing about sharks in there, so.
I read it with the lights off and a flashlight. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, that probably set the tone real nicely.
I read it at all different places.
Yeah, this is good.
I can't give you an answer to that check mark, though.
Yeah, did you guys think it had any meaning, or is it just another one of those
Honestly,
weird...
I don't even remember noticing it.
Really?
Yeah.
That's great. So there were other things that I picked up on throughout the entire book. That's the first time I noticed the check mark.
Yeah.
That's
I
weird.
saw the few shapes where I'm like, okay, this is probably a footnote, and then I go looking for the footnote, and I'm just like, wait, there's no footnote with this shape. So it's just like, maybe that's the insanity coming in where he's just like, oh, let me just put this here, and let me put this here.
I think what I know for sure is that one cannot read this one time and feel that they have this book down pat.
It's kind of like the movie The Matrix.
You have
like
to
every time you watch the movie The Matrix, you always get something different out of it.
I just thought of this now. My sister, when we were looking up stuff on this book, she loves this book, and she was the one that gave it to me to begin with. My older sister, who's like a huge literary buff. She told me that Danielewski, I'm pronouncing his last name wrong, Mark, the guy who wrote the book, behind this whole entire travesty, he finally signed the rights to a TV series, and that's just started this year, or in 2018. For years, that was another argument within the fan base of this book, was, you know, people were like, we need to make this into a movie. I feel like, here's my question to you guys, does it lose its certain luster if there is a visual component to it that is not just the book?
Most of the time when they make a movie out of a book, they always leaves parts out. And honestly, if they were to make a TV show or a movie about this book, they could not leave anything out, because then it'd be like, wait, that doesn't make sense. Why is it doing that? But yeah, it could explain it later on. But the order that they did it in this book, I believe, was like spot on. Like they did it that way.
Yeah, again, harkening back to the way that the story is told, not just the story itself, is highly important, because I feel like without the tangible interactive aspect of it, like this, you lose some semblance of the creepy aloofness.
Yeah,
because
you can't.
I think that's the benefit. I think the benefit of making it a mini-series is it would be more... I think they're more likely to incorporate the different details, but in what order you do them, because you cannot really read this in order, because at the end, because the way that it ends, it devotes at least 100 more pages to specific details. Mm-hmm. You have the diaries.
Also lose the choice aspect of it, because you could literally just read this straight through without reading any of the footnotes, or you could literally go on that fun romp through the footnotes and try to follow that. So either you lose some of the madness of the introspective trying to follow the story that is being laid out for you on a total, or you can, follow the linear story, which is just the critical analysis of this movie that doesn't exist. Mm-hmm. So I feel like you lose some of that ability, the interactiveness, which becomes more of a choice on your part as the reader of what do you consume and how does this story consume your interest. So mm-hmm. I feel like you lose a lot of that. If I'm a purist and I'm going to say, don't touch it. And if they do that, this is just my thought process, kind of like how they did with Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Mm-hmm.
Originally started out as a radio series, and then it got made into a book series, and then it got made into the movie that is the more contemporary movie. And each one of them, follows this story, but it's not necessarily the exact story, so it's a little bit different. It takes place in the same realm, in the same universe, but it follows kind of a different path every single time. It's like a reimagining. So I can see something like that happening, where it's maybe a different person following that. That would be interesting. I'd love to see the interactivity in that aspect of it.
Like maybe instead of actually doing a series about this book exactly, maybe do a series of somebody finding the manuscript.
So like you as the reader are a character in
basically
this book.
The next author.
Exactly. So you as the reader becomes you the character in this. That becomes a character. So that adds another layer of you the witness to you the character to you the reader. I can see something like that happening, but I feel like
that would be a cool concept.
Yeah, I feel like that's a little out there though.
Yeah.
This is a cerebral book without being a cerebral.
Yeah, there's
book.
there's a lot that you can do about it, but there's a lot of complications that come with it.
Absolutely, yeah. So I'll be intrigued to see if that follows through, if it actually does come to fruition, and how that manifests. But until then, if you want to have some fun, find this book.
Lose your sanity for a while.
This is not one of those, you bring it with you on a bus ride somewhere because you're going to get stuck on that bus and totally lose track. I've lost track of time in this book. Again, second time reading it, I've lost 2 hours to this book and was like, it's nighttime, what just happened? Yep. But so if you're interested in it as well, there's like a ton of forum stuff like that. So I say read the book first.
How far did you get in 2 hours?
I got to the end of the Navison movie. I picked it up and I was like, I gotta read this. I had some overnight shifts coming because I had worked wonky hours at my job, so my whole entire sleep schedule has been off. So while my family has been going to bed, I'm like, it's 11 o'clock. Let me just be bright-eyed and bushy-tailed.
And the next thing you know, your alarm is going off.
4 o'clock in the morning, and I have the book upside down, and I'm like, what happened? So. To the feeling like you're losing your marbles. Yeah, this book will do that.
It gives you that like how Navison was getting sucked into that's what it does. It sucks you in.
The book
is the house.
The physical representation of the house, which kind of lends itself, which is brought up at one point. The topic of perception and how perceiving I knew what to look for and I knew where the certain things were going to happen. So I knew this book seemed infinitely longer the first time reading it, but kind of in the same way of, the hall and the stairs change shape depending on who's perceiving it. The book kind of took that. But then there are other parts that, like the little check mark. Like, I noticed all these other things that just sent me off on a tailspin in another direction. Like, I actually sat there and, like I said, I pulled up Morse code, pulled up the alphabet, and was, like, trying to figure out what it was saying, which I'm fairly certain there's you need a cipher key for that.
The check mark's definitely there for a reason, but what that reason is
I don't know.
You got to determine.
Up to debate.
Most
and oh boy, is it debated, so.
Already done. Do we have any final thoughts?
I'm once I put the book down, I was upset that it was over. I'm just like, crap, another movie or another book to add to my favorites list. Because, like I said, I was fascinated with the book when I first heard about it, and it did not what's the word I'm looking for? It did not
disappoint.
There you go.
I think that it's something that you can really become immersed in. It's subject to a cult classic of its own.
Oh, it is a cult classic, so it's...
But to me, it wasn't... I wouldn't say it wasn't a favorite book of mine. I liked the Navidson part. I like how I like how innovative it was, how revolutionary it was. I like how much depth they gave the characters and in such a different way. But I would say that Navidson's story, while it was the most fascinating, I think that the effect was far more, you can definitely tell he was going more for the effect than for the story. And Johnny Truant's story, I wasn't fond of that at all.
I will agree with you. I'm not necessarily his biggest fan either throughout the entire thing. But
I don't give a rat's rear end about how many prostitutes you banged.
Yeah, I will have to say, trigger warning, there's a lot of sex in this book, which is surprising.
If you were going to tell stories about that, like the prostitutes and stuff, at least go into detail. Give us some hope.
No, I don't want detail. I don't want detail. But I think that's another thing that's done on purpose.
He should write his own memoir that nobody's going to buy.
I think that's done on purpose to juxtapose. You have this eloquently written dissertation of this movie that may or may not have any real credence in the world. And then you have these weird, anecdotes that are crude and crass and off the cuff and make no sense and go in all these different directions. And so you have these parallels, and it's like these same things are happening to these same people in different ways. So it shows how stories can be linear without taking place at the same time. So I feel like, yes, I am not a fan of the character whatsoever, and I don't think you're necessarily supposed to be. And I feel like that was done on purpose.
At least they make mention to the fact that he's that way for a reason, and they go in depth about the letters that his mother wrote to him while she was in the institution. So. That's the way he was raised, too.
Yeah.
But it was interesting how she signed, instead of signing many of them as mom, she signed it as by her first initial, P. And it almost seemed as if there was an Oedipal relationship from her to him.
Well, you already see that he has issues with women, and issues with relationships in general, and finding stability, and not allowing himself to find stability. Again, lending itself credence to having that mental breakdown is very, very easily, and the house isn't stable. You don't have a strong foundation in a house that constantly is shifting. It could be physical, it could be mental. Tying it all back to the same thing. So this book is just fantastic. If you are a fan of traditionally written books, this is not the book for you. If you are looking for something that is different and funky and out there, and you are a big fan of the found footage or the found material, horror genre, pick up this book. Because it kind of schools, I feel, all of the more contemporary forms of the horror movies and stuff like that. I feel like it sets the stage for, if you look at it, There's on YouTube the Slender Man series,
Mm-hmm.
Marble Hornets. All of those
Slender Man's
series.
gotten himself in a lot of
Oh
trouble.
my god! And now he's so commercial. I hate to sound like but like
the girls that stabbed the other young girl because of Slender
I
Man.
can't. But like. That's a whole other soapbox for another day. But long story short, if you're into that kind of stuff and you want to see something that is original, I feel like this kind of set the tone and the stage, because this book is actually referenced in some of the YouTube channel series for this, and it is the basis for some of the creation myth for that. If I remember correctly, I could be misquoted there. But long story short, this book kind of did it first and did it in such a spectacular way that it is not something that you want to give up or miss. So it's a great fall read.
Yeah, I completely agree that if you're into that psychological, like, horror and stuff, to definitely read this book.
It takes you by the hand and it shows as it tells, but it doesn't shove it down your throat in such a garish way.
If you're into psychological horror and non-traditional arts.
So get ready to
Work out your arms.
you're literally twisting the book all over the place. So it is it is an interactive read, quite literally an interactive read.
Learn how to read Braille too.
Keep your phone, keep a device that you can get on the internet handy. We have the advent of that in forums and years and years. We have like over 10 years.
somebody already translated
people
it.
deciphering it, so you can go down. That's another rabbit hole for another
I didn't
day.
even know that, so I'm just like.
You could probably just Google Braille and House of
Literally,
Leaves.
just type in House of Leaves and the amount of like conspiracy theory-esque like rabbit holes you can go down. You can spend a week. You can spend a weekend just losing yourself to this entire book and the world that it created. It is fantastic.
But then again, when I engage in these discussions, I only like to do as much research as I feel I need to, and I really like to read as little of other people's critical analyses as possible. Because
Well, it's not even just critical; it's just trying to decipher what the F is going on these pages.
Yeah.
Like,
it's just me going into a work. I like to do it acoustically.
Go in
sense. I
blindly
like that.
a little bit, yeah.
That's what I'm saying, is read the book, and then if you find it interesting, it weaves such a fantastic mystery that you can't not think about it for a long time. And I think that's the mark of an excellent book. You don't have to like it, you don't have to like the characters in it, but if it makes you think about it for hours or days on end afterwards, if it pops into your head every once in a while, it's the sign of a good book.
Yeah, I
At the very
agree with that
least, of a
completely.
compelling read. So.
How would we rate this on a 0 to 5 scale with half stars permitted, Nick?
I'd probably give it a 4.5.
Okay.
4.5.
I give it a 5. I just think it sets up to do something and it does it exceptionally. So I give it a 5.
I give it a 3.5 because I like the elements and I liked the strategy, but the story itself was I think it was more about it's like at the movie theater where it's a bit more about the special effects than it is about the story.
Which is
And
funny because that's an argument.
and Johnny Truant was not. I wasn't a big fan of his story and his tangents, so I stay at 3.5. Where, and if you're going to read if you're going to read this, you have to have the open mind, the patience, the dedication, and the commitment. Even though dedication and commitment are synonyms, in general, you. I'll just put it to you this way: you have to be able to have an open mind and immerse yourself.
Yeah, you're getting into something here.
Yeah.
And Tori's the reason that I got into this.
And I'm glad you
She
guys.
she wanted to discuss this, and enough people showed great interest. So there we go. Here's my copy of House of Leaves. It's not as worn as Tori's.
Yeah, mine is like love-worn, dog-eared.
Secretly, I'm holding a copy too. No.
Or-
I forgot mine.
it's all good.
Tori's was on a beach too. With the
Yeah,
sand.
it was my sister's, and then it got lent to me. And
Funny enough, mine doesn't have that.
Yeah, I don't think mine does either.
I guess it depends on when we got it.
Oh yeah, yours doesn't have. Sorry, His doesn't have the pause button.
Yours
does
is
it?
cheaper too.
Oh, well, this one was purchased like 10 years ago. So
Yeah, that's probably why.
yeah.
Mine is a new copy from. Oh, I got mine off of Amazon. It's a. The only time I really use Amazon is when there's a book that I really need at a particular time, whether it be for the show or just in general. Otherwise, I like to go to the
lends
bookstore.
itself that it's all dog-eared, and it's not mine, it's my sister's. It got lent to me, so I don't know.
You'd be in trouble if you were the one reading it on the beach.
Yeah, you'd have to send help. I'd be like, I don't know what's going on anymore.
You get sunburn everywhere.
Oh God.
You got sunburn after the first session.
This is true. This is true.
But you got fed.
This is also true. So.
Alrighty then. Be sure to join us next time for another episode of Literary Gladiators. For now, keep reading.